There's something hauntingly irresistible about the idea of a lost tomb, a resting place that slipped through the cracks of history, taking its secrets with it. Picture a king or queen who once commanded empires, whose name echoed through the ages, now lying in a hidden chamber, untouched and unknown. These aren't just empty graves, they're time capsules waiting to be cracked open, holding answers to questions we've asked for centuries. And the most tantalizing part, some of history's most powerful rulers, figures who shaped civilizations, still lie hidden, their tombs eluding even the most determined explorers. Why does the thought of these undiscovered burials captivate us so deeply? Maybe it's the thrill of the hunt, the chance to uncover a story thought lost forever. Or perhaps it's the lingering mystery: how could someone so significant vanish without a trace? From the deserts of Egypt to the jungles of the Americas, the earth guards these royal secrets fiercely. Some tombs were hidden intentionally, their locations known only to a trusted few. Others were swallowed by time, their markers eroded, their legends fading into myth. But the absence of these graves doesn't just leave a hole in the ground. It leaves a gap in our understanding of who these rulers really were, how they lived, and how they chose to be remembered. Today, we're setting out on a journey through history's greatest unsolved archaeological puzzles, tracking down 30 ancient rulers whose tombs remain lost. These aren't just missing grave sites, they're missing pieces of our shared human story. Some names will be familiar: legendary conquerors, visionary leaders, while others might surprise you, rulers whose legacies have been overshadowed by time. But each one holds a clue, a thread that could unravel mysteries we've puzzled over for generations. So come with us as we venture into the shadows of the past, where the line between history and legend blurs, and where the next great discovery might be waiting just beneath our feet. The question isn't just where these tombs are hidden, it's what they might reveal when, or if, they're finally found. Alexander the Great, a name that still thunders across the centuries, synonymous with conquest, ambition, and an empire that stretched from Greece to the edges of India. But for all the battles he won and cities he founded, one mystery has outlasted even his legend: the final resting place of history's most celebrated conqueror. His death in Babylon in the year 323 BC sparked not just mourning but a power struggle, and a race to control his body. Some accounts claim his generals wanted him buried in Macedonia, his homeland. Others say he wished to rest in the temple of Ammon at Siwa Oasis, where he was declared a son of the gods. Yet the most persistent theory places his tomb in Alexandria, the city he founded, where it supposedly became a pilgrimage site for emperors and explorers alike. So why has no one found it? Wars, earthquakes, and shifting coastlines have reshaped Alexandria over millennia, swallowing entire districts beneath the sea or under modern streets. Some scholars argue his tomb was dismantled or repurposed, its treasures looted, its location forgotten. Others insist it's still there, hidden in plain sight, perhaps beneath a mosque or a bustling marketplace. The search has fueled obsession for generations. Napoleon reportedly asked about it during his Egyptian campaign, and even Hitler was said to be curious. But the earth keeps its secrets. What makes Alexander's lost tomb so tantalizing isn't just the man himself, but what might lie beside him: lost texts, artifacts from his campaigns, or even clues to how he saw his own legacy. Until someone uncovers the truth, his final chapter remains as elusive as the man who conquered the known world. Genghis Khan's final resting place is perhaps history's greatest disappearing act, a burial so meticulously concealed that even 8 centuries later, the earth refuses to give up its secret. The founder of the Mongol Empire, a man who forged the largest contiguous land empire in history, deliberately orchestrated his own vanishing act. According to legend, his funeral procession slaughtered every witness along the route, then diverted a river to flow over his tomb, erasing all traces. But was it really that simple? The truth is, we don't even know where to start looking. the myths surrounding Genghis Khan's burial are as vast as the steppes he once ruled. Some say he lies beneath a sacred mountain in Mongolia, where the ground itself is forbidden to explorers out of respect. Others whisper that his grave is marked by a forest planted atop it, the trees standing as silent sentinels. But the most enduring tale is the river diversion, an ingenious ploy to thwart grave robbers by literally burying the evidence under rushing water. Yet modern archaeologists have their doubts. Rivers shift over time, and without precise records, the search area spans thousands of square miles of rugged, remote terrain that hasn't stopped the hunt. Expeditions armed with satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar have scoured the Mongolian wilderness, chasing clues from ancient texts and local folklore. Some researchers believe his tomb could hold not just treasures but lost chapters of Mongol history, artifacts, writings, or even the legendary golden banner of Genghis Khan himself. But the search is fraught with challenges. Mongolia's government tightly controls archaeological work, wary of disrespecting cultural taboos. And then there's the sheer scale of the landscape, a needle in a haystack scenario where the haystack is an entire country. What makes this mystery so compelling isn't just the physical tomb but what it represents. Genghis Khan wasn't just a conqueror, he was a paradox, a ruler who demanded absolute loyalty yet insisted on anonymity in death. His burial was the ultimate power move, a final act of control over his own legacy. To find his grave would be to confront the man behind the myth, to see the emperor not as history remembers him but as he chose to be remembered. Until then, the Mongolian steppes keep their silence, guarding a secret that even time hasn't been able to crack. Cleopatra VII. The name alone conjures images of golden barges, political cunning, and a love story that sealed the fate of an empire. Yet for all her fame, Egypt's last pharaoh remains as elusive in death as she was captivating in life. Unlike the grandeur of pyramids or the stark majesty of the Valley of the Kings, Cleopatra's tomb has never been found. And the most tantalizing clue, she may not be alone. Ancient historians like Plutarch claim she was buried alongside Mark Antony, her Roman lover and ally, in a tomb so magnificent it would make the gods envious. But where theories have swirled for centuries, some argue her tomb lies beneath the Mediterranean, lost to rising seas or ancient earthquakes. Others insist it was hidden near Alexandria, the city that was her stronghold and her stage. But in recent years, one site has stolen the spotlight: Taposiris Magna, a temple complex just west of Alexandria. Archaeologists have uncovered tunnels lined with golden artifacts, mummies adorned with intricate jewelry, and tantalizing hints of a royal burial. The temple itself was dedicated to Osiris, god of the afterlife, a fitting resting place for a queen who styled herself as Isis reborn. So why has the tomb defied discovery? Alexandria's coastline has been reshaped by centuries of earthquakes and tsunamis, potentially submerging entire sections of the city. Then there's the political angle. After Cleopatra's suicide, her conqueror, Octavian, may have deliberately obscured her burial to erase her legacy. Or perhaps the tomb was looted long ago, its treasures scattered, its location forgotten. But the search continues, driven by the enduring allure of Cleopatra herself. Finding her tomb wouldn't just solve an archaeological mystery, it could rewrite history. Imagine uncovering lost scrolls from the Library of Alexandria, or artifacts that reveal the truth about her relationships with Caesar and Antony. Even the walls of her burial chamber might hold clues to her final days. Did she really die by the bite of an asp, or was her end more calculated? The answers lie somewhere beneath the sands, waiting for the right explorer to uncover them. Until then, Cleopatra keeps her last secret, as enigmatic in death as she was in life. Attila the Hun, the scourge of God, ruled with such terror that his very name sent empires scrambling to negotiate. Yet when death came for him in the year 453, it wasn't on a battlefield but in his own wedding bed, struck down by a sudden hemorrhage. The irony was lost on no one. The man who had spent a lifetime drowning Europe in chaos met his end quietly, almost mundanely, but what happened next was anything but ordinary. His followers, determined to protect his legacy, staged a funeral fit for a legend, and then made sure no one would ever find it. The burial of Attila was an act of calculated secrecy. Ancient accounts describe a triple-layered coffin, gold, silver, and iron, lowered into the earth as horsemen trampled the ground above to erase all traces. Then, according to legend, the slaves who dug the grave were slaughtered on the spot. But the most haunting detail, some stories claim the Huns diverted a river to flow over Attila's tomb, burying him beneath the current. It's a tactic we've heard before, echoing Genghis Khan's myth, but here the stakes were even higher. Attila's empire was fracturing, and his followers knew that without his body, no rival could claim the symbolic victory of desecrating his grave. So where does that leave modern searchers? The truth is, Attila's tomb may already be gone. The great Hungarian plain where he's believed to rest has been plowed, flooded, and looted for centuries. Treasure hunters, drawn by tales of gold and weapons buried with him, may have stumbled upon the site long ago without realizing its significance. Even if the tomb survived, pinpointing its location is nearly impossible. The Huns left no monuments, no inscriptions, just whispers on the wind. Yet the mystery endures because of what it represents. Attila wasn't just a brute, he was a strategist who understood the power of myth. By vanishing into the earth, he became eternal, a ghost lingering at the edges of history. Finding his tomb wouldn't just uncover a body, it would force us to confront the man behind the monster. Did he see himself as a destroyer or as a king worthy of reverence? Until the river gives up its secret, if it ever does, we're left with only echoes of hoofbeats and a question. Was his burial the last act of a warlord or the first chapter of an immortal legend? Emperor Qin Shi Huang's tomb is the holy grail of Chinese archaeology, a sprawling underground empire guarded by an army of terracotta warriors. Yet its heart remains untouched, sealed away for over 2,000 years. This was no ordinary burial. China's first emperor didn't just want a tomb, he demanded an eternal kingdom, complete with rivers of mercury, palaces of jade, and booby traps designed to kill intruders. The terracotta army, discovered in the 1970s, was merely the outermost layer of his grand design. But the real prize, the emperor's central burial chamber, has never been opened, and for good reason. Ancient texts describe the tomb as a microcosm of the universe, with constellations painted on the ceiling and landscapes molded into the floor. Most chillingly, historian Sima Qian wrote of crossbows rigged to shoot anyone who enters, and rivers of liquid mercury symbolizing the Yellow and Yangtze rivers. Modern science has confirmed parts of this legend. Soil tests reveal mercury levels around the mound are off the charts, hinting at the toxic truth beneath. But it's not just the poison that gives archaeologists pause. The entire structure is a masterpiece of ancient engineering, built to collapse if disturbed. Excavating it risks destroying the very treasures it hides. Technology is the biggest hurdle. Right now, we lack the tools to safely penetrate the tomb without damaging its contents. Imagine opening a time capsule only to watch silks disintegrate, paints fade, or wooden artifacts crumble to dust. The tomb's environment, sealed for millennia, could be irreparably altered by exposure to modern air. Some researchers propose using miniature robots or non-invasive imaging, but even these methods aren't foolproof. Then there's the ethical dilemma. Do we have the right to disturb Qin Shi Huang's rest, especially when Chinese tradition holds that the dead should remain undisturbed? Yet the potential discoveries are staggering. The tomb could hold lost texts from the emperor's infamous book burnings, intricate mechanical wonders, or even the emperor himself preserved in ways we can't yet imagine. His burial might rewrite our understanding of ancient Chinese technology, art, and power. For now, the mound stands as a silent sentinel, a reminder that some secrets aren't meant to be uncovered, at least not yet. The terracotta warriors were just the beginning. The real mystery lies deeper, waiting for the day when science and respect can finally unlock history's most forbidden vault. Alaric the Visigoth left Rome in ruins, but his own fate was just as dramatic as the empire he helped unravel. After leading his people to sack the Eternal City in the year 410, this Gothic king didn't live long to celebrate his victory. He died suddenly, some say of fever, while marching through southern Italy, leaving his followers with a dilemma. How do you bury a conqueror without letting his enemies desecrate his grave? Their answer was pure audacity. They rerouted an entire river. The Bucento River became the stage for one of history's most elaborate funerary secrets. According to legend, Alaric's warriors temporarily diverted the waterway, digging a tomb deep in its bed. They buried their king with treasures plundered from Rome, gold, silver, perhaps even sacred relics, then unleashed the river back over the site, washing away all traces. But the precautions didn't stop there. The slaves who built the tomb were allegedly killed to ensure their silence, turning the riverbank into a mass grave. It was a burial fit for a man who'd humbled an empire designed to vanish into the landscape. For centuries, the story was dismissed as folklore until modern technology raised new questions. Ground-penetrating radar and sonar surveys along the Bucento's course have revealed unnatural sediment patterns, hinting at human interference. Some archaeologists believe they've pinpointed the exact bend where the river might have been altered, a spot where the terrain aligns eerily with ancient descriptions. But the real challenge isn't just finding the tomb, it's reaching it. The Bucento's waters are unpredictable, and excavating beneath a flowing river would be a logistical nightmare. Then there's the tantalizing possibility of what lies hidden. If Alaric was buried with even a fraction of Rome's loot, his grave could hold lost artifacts from the empire's twilight, crown jewels, pagan statues, or documents that vanished during the sack. But the river guards its secrets well. Local superstitions still warn against disturbing the site, claiming Alaric's ghost curses those who seek his gold. Whether myth or reality, one thing's certain. The king who brought Rome to its knees chose the perfect final trick, a burial that slips through our fingers like water, leaving only whispers in its wake. Nefertiti, the name alone conjures images of golden headdresses, striking beauty, and a queen who wielded power like few women in ancient Egypt. Yet for all her fame, her final resting place remains one of Egyptology's most heated debates. Unlike the grand tombs of pharaohs in the Valley of the Kings, Nefertiti's burial site has never been confirmed. But what if she's been hiding in plain sight all along? The most explosive theory suggests her tomb isn't lost at all. It's tucked away right behind the walls of Tutankhamun's burial chamber. The idea first gained traction in 2015 when British archaeologist Nicholas Reeves examined high-resolution scans of Tutankhamun's tomb. He noticed faint outlines in the plaster, lines that looked suspiciously like hidden doorways. One in particular on the north wall seemed to lead to a larger, undisturbed chamber. Reeves proposed this could be the long-lost burial of Nefertiti, Tutankhamun's likely stepmother. After all, Tut's tomb is unusually small for a pharaoh, almost as if it were an afterthought tacked onto a grander original plan. The theory suggests Nefertiti's tomb was repurposed for Tutankhamun after his sudden death, sealing her away behind a false wall, but not everyone's convinced. Radar scans of the tomb in 2016 and 2020 yielded conflicting results. Some showed anomalies consistent with hidden chambers, while others detected nothing. The Egyptian government has been cautious, wary of damaging one of the world's most famous archaeological sites. Critics argue the doorway marks could just be natural cracks or ancient repairs. And then there's the broader puzzle. If Nefertiti was buried as a pharaoh, why would her tomb be so discreet? She ruled alongside Akhenaten during Egypt's religious revolution, a time when traditional burial practices were appended. Could her tomb defy all expectations? The stakes are sky high. finding Nefertiti's burial could rewrite our understanding of Egypt's most turbulent period, the Amarna era. Imagine uncovering lost artifacts from her reign, or even her mummy, which some believe may already be in a museum under a mislabeled name. The possibility of untouched paintings, scrolls, or goldwork hidden for millennia is enough to make any historian's heart race. But until someone takes the monumental step of drilling a tiny camera through that north wall, the mystery endures. Nefertiti, the queen who vanished into history, may have orchestrated her greatest disappearing act yet, leaving us to wonder if her legacy is truly lost or just waiting behind a thin layer of plaster. King Arthur's tomb is where history and legend collide, a burial so shrouded in mystery that even separating fact from fiction feels like pulling a sword from stone. The stories paint him as the once and future king, a warrior who united Britain against invaders before vanishing into myth. But if Arthur was real, where did his followers lay him to rest? The most famous claim comes from Glastonbury Abbey, where monks in the year 1191 announced a shocking discovery. Beneath an ancient oak, they'd unearthed a lead cross bearing the inscription, "Here lies buried the renowned King Arthur in the Isle of Avalon." The timing was suspicious. The abbey had just burned down, and rebuilding it required funds and pilgrims. Suddenly, they had the ultimate draw, the grave of Britain's greatest legend. Inside the coffin, they claimed, were the bones of a towering man and a woman, perhaps Arthur and Queen Guinevere, alongside a lock of golden hair that crumbled when touched. Skeptics argue it was a clever hoax, a way to boost the abbey's prestige. Yet some details are oddly specific. The burial was deep beneath older layers, suggesting it wasn't just planted. And the lead cross, its Latin phrasing matched early medieval style. But Glastonbury isn't the only contender for Avalon. The name itself is a riddle. Some say it refers to the abbey's watery surroundings, once an island in a marsh. Others argue Avalon was farther west, in Cornwall or even Brittany, where Celtic legends placed an otherworldly paradise. The truth might be that Arthur's grave was never meant to be found. In early Welsh tales, he doesn't die but sleeps in a hidden cave, waiting to return when Britain needs him most. Modern archaeology hasn't helped settle the debate. Excavations at Glastonbury in the 20th century found nothing conclusive, and the original bones and cross were lost during the Reformation. Without physical evidence, the search becomes a dance between folklore and fact. Was Arthur a real 6th century warlord whose grave was later mythologized? Or is his tomb purely a medieval invention, a story crafted to unite a fractured nation? What makes this search so compelling isn't just the potential discovery, it's what Arthur represents. Finding his grave would force us to confront the man behind the round table, stripping away centuries of romantic embellishment. Until then, his burial remains the perfect metaphor for the Arthurian legend itself, always just out of reach, shimmering between history and imagination. Whether beneath Glastonbury's ruins or hidden in some mist-shrouded isle, the king's final secret endures, as elusive as Excalibur beneath the lake. Boudicca's story burns like a wildfire through British history, a queen who led a rebellion so fierce it nearly toppled Roman rule. After her warriors razed London, Colchester, and St. Albans, leaving smoking ruins in their wake, the final act of her revolt remains shrouded in conflicting accounts. Did she fall in battle, her body lost in the carnage, or did she take her own life with poison, denying Rome the satisfaction of capturing her? Ancient historians like Tacitus and Cassius Dio offer differing versions, but they agree on one haunting detail. Her burial site was kept secret, a final act of defiance against the empire that had humiliated her. The search for Boudicca's grave has centered on eastern England, where her rebellion reached its climax. Some believe she lies beneath what's now King's Cross Station in London, where folklore claims a mound once marked her resting place. Others point to the rugged hills of Norfolk, her ancestral homeland, where the earth might have swallowed her remains without a trace. But the challenge isn't just geographical, it's archaeological. Unlike pharaohs or emperors, Boudicca's people, the Iceni, left no grand monuments or inscribed tombs. Their burials were often simple, the dead laid to rest with modest offerings. Without a golden sarcophagus or towering pyramid to signal her presence, her grave could be any unmarked mound in the countryside. Modern technology offers faint glimmers of hope. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed hidden Iron Age sites across Britain, and soil analysis can detect ancient disturbances. Yet even if archaeologists found a likely candidate, proving it's Boudicca would be nearly impossible. The Iceni left no written records and Roman accounts are vague. Her grave might hold weapons, a chariot or the torque, a twisted metal necklace symbolizing her rank, but without an inscription, certainty remains out of reach. What makes this search so compelling isn't just the physical grave, but what it represents. Boudicca wasn't just a warrior, she was a symbol of resistance, a leader who rallied her people against impossible odds. Finding her tomb would be like uncovering the heartbeat of a rebellion that still echoes today. Until then, she remains a ghost in the landscape, her final resting place as untamed as the legacy she left behind somewhere between history's pages and the wild, uncharted earth. Emperor Nero's legacy is a paradox, a ruler who fiddled while Rome burned, whose name became synonymous with tyranny, yet whose final fate remains as murky as the rumors that swirl around his reign. Ancient historians like Suetonius and Tacitus paint him as a monster, a man who ordered his mother's murder, persecuted Christians, and allegedly sang atop a tower as flames consumed the city. But when his own people turned against him, forcing him to flee Rome in disgrace, the emperor's end was almost pitiful. Cornered by assassins in the year 68, he reportedly stabbed himself in the throat with a dagger, whimpering, "What an artist the world is losing." Yet even in death, Nero refused to fade quietly into history. His body disappeared, and the mystery of what happened to it has gnawed at scholars for centuries. The most widely accepted account claims his loyal nursemaid, Acti, cremated him in secret on a funeral pyre outside Rome, scattering his ashes in a golden urn to prevent his enemies from desecrating them. But here's where things get tangled. Some sources suggest his tomb once stood near what's now Rome's Piazza del Popolo, marked by a modest monument. Others insist his remains were spirited away to the family mausoleum of the Domitii, his ancestral clan. And then there's the wilder theory that Nero never died at all. For decades after his death, imposters claiming to be the resurrected emperor popped up across the empire, sparking rebellions, proof of just how polarizing, how unforgettable his specter remained. Modern archaeology hasn't settled the debate. Excavations near Piazza del Popolo revealed a 1st-century tomb lined with exquisite frescoes, but no inscriptions tied it definitively to Nero. The Domitii Mausoleum, its ruins lie beneath a modern hospital, rendering it virtually inaccessible. The lack of physical evidence isn't surprising. Rome's elite had every reason to erase Nero's memory. His name was damned, his statues toppled, his likeness chiseled from monuments in a brutal campaign of damnatio memoriae. Why preserve a tomb for a man the empire wanted to forget? Yet the absence of Nero's remains speaks volumes. It's a fitting end for a ruler who thrived on spectacle, a vanishing act that forces us to confront the blurred line between tyrant and tragic figure. Would uncovering his ashes rewrite his story, or simply confirm what we already suspect, that history's villains are rarely as simple as their legends? For now, Nero's final act remains as ambiguous as his reign, a ghost haunting the margins of Rome's grand narrative, waiting for someone to sift through the ashes and find the man behind the myth. Montezuma II's story is one of history's cruelest ironies, an emperor who welcomed invaders as gods, only to die a prisoner in his own palace. The last great ruler of the Aztec Empire met his end in the year 1520, caught between his people's rage and the Spanish conquistadors he'd naively trusted. But what happened to his body after that violent, chaotic moment? The Spanish accounts are frustratingly vague. Some claim Cortés allowed Montezuma's loyal nobles to carry his remains away under cover of night. Others whisper that his corpse was secretly smuggled out of Tenochtitlan to avoid desecration by the Aztecs themselves, who blamed him for their suffering. The most persistent legend says he was buried in Chapultepec, the sacred hill where Aztec rulers once held court, overlooking the lakes that defined their capital. Yet finding Montezuma's tomb today isn't just a matter of following clues. It's a race against time and concrete. Modern Mexico City, built atop the ruins of Tenochtitlan, has sprawled over every inch of the ancient landscape. Chapultepec is now a bustling urban park, its soil crisscrossed with underground utilities and metro lines. Even if Montezuma lies there, excavation would mean disrupting the life of a metropolis. The few surviving Aztec texts, like the Florentine Codex, offer tantalizing hints but no precise coordinates. Spanish records, written by men with little regard for indigenous burial customs, are equally unreliable. The search is further complicated by the nature of Aztec royal burials. Unlike Egyptian pharaohs, Aztec rulers weren't interred with pyramids or golden sarcophagi. Their funerary rites involved cremation, with ashes placed in urns or sacred caves. Montezuma might not even have a traditional tomb, just a hidden repository for his remains, perhaps marked by a now-vanished shrine. Some archaeologists speculate his burial was intentionally unremarkable, a final act of humility from a disgraced leader. Others believe the Spanish melted down any golden burial artifacts long ago, erasing the trail. What makes this mystery so haunting is what it represents: not just a missing grave, but a cultural vanishing point. Finding Montezuma's resting place would mean touching the last, fragile thread connecting modern Mexico to the empire it lost. It could rewrite the story of the conquest, offering Aztec perspectives drowned out by Spanish chronicles. Until then, his fate remains a shadow in the soil, buried as deeply as the lakes that once mirrored Tenochtitlan's glory. Cyrus the Great carved an empire so vast it stretched from the Aegean Sea to the Himalayas, yet his final resting place holds nothing but questions. The tomb at Pasargadae, a simple but striking limestone structure rising from the Iranian plateau, stands as one of history's most poignant empty boxes. Ancient sources like Arrian and Strabo describe it as a sacred site, guarded by Magi priests and visited by Alexander the Great himself, who paid respects to the man he admired as a model ruler. But open the sarcophagus today, and you'll find only silence, no body, no treasures, just the ghost of a king whose legacy outlasted even his bones. What happened here? The theories are as layered as the Persian Empire itself. Grave robbers are the obvious suspects. Pasargadae's isolation made it vulnerable, and the tomb's modest exterior belied the riches it might have held: gold, ceremonial weapons, or the famed cloak Cyrus wore in battle. Yet the lack of damage to the structure suggests something more deliberate. Some historians argue the body was moved for safekeeping as empires rose and fell around it. The Achaemenids, fearing the wrath of Alexander or later conquerors, could have secretly relocated Cyrus to a hidden sanctuary. There's even a fringe theory that Zoroastrian customs, which favor exposure of the dead to the elements, meant Cyrus was never buried here at all, that the tomb was a symbolic cenotaph, a place of reverence without remains. The mystery deepens when you consider the tomb's design. Unlike the pyramids or grand mausoleums of other rulers, Cyrus chose restraint, a gabled roof atop 6 stacked tiers, echoing the simplicity of his leadership philosophy. Inscribed on its walls, a message attributed to him reads, "O man, I am Cyrus, son of Cambyses, who founded the Persian Empire and ruled Asia. Grudge me not this monument." It's a plea for respect, not secrecy, so why would his followers hide his body? Perhaps the answer lies in the chaos that followed his death. The empire fractured, rebellions flared, and safeguarding his remains might have been an act of devotion, a way to protect the king's spirit from desecration. Modern archaeology hasn't closed the case. Excavations around Pasargadae have uncovered no alternate burial sites, no hidden chambers. The tomb itself, though stripped, still whispers clues. The empty sarcophagus bears marks where a lid once sealed it, and the surrounding complex includes a fire altar, hinting at Zoroastrian rituals, but the earth keeps its secrets. For now, Cyrus's absence is as telling as his presence would be, a reminder that even the mightiest rulers can vanish, leaving behind not bones but legends. The tomb stands as a paradox, a monument to a king who reshaped the world, yet whose physical trace slipped through history's fingers. Was it theft, reverence, or something deeper that emptied that stone chamber? Until the desert yields its answer, Cyrus the Great remains forever present in his absence, a shadow cast by the very monument meant to eternalize him. King Solomon. The name conjures images of golden temples, divine wisdom, and an empire that stretched from the Euphrates to Egypt. Yet for all his legendary wealth and power, his final resting place remains one of history's most contested mysteries. The Bible recounts his reign in lavish detail but falls curiously silent about his burial, leaving archaeologists and theologians to piece together clues scattered across centuries and continents. Two theories dominate the debate. One ties his tomb to Jerusalem's Temple Mount, the very heart of his kingdom, while the other sends it far south to the highlands of Ethiopia. But which holds water, and why does it matter? Let's start with Jerusalem. 1st century historian Josephus claimed Solomon was buried in the city of David, the ancient core of Jerusalem where his father, David, was laid to rest. Some scholars argue his tomb lies beneath the Temple Mount, possibly near the original site of Solomon's temple, a location now off-limits to excavations due to its sacred status in Judaism and Islam. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers beneath the mount, but political tensions make any exploration fraught. Even if access were granted, identifying Solomon's tomb would be like finding a needle in a golden haystack. The Temple Mount has been rebuilt, demolished, and rebuilt again over millennia, its layers a puzzle of conquests and reconstructions. Then there's Ethiopia's audacious claim. The Kebra Nagast, a 14th century Ethiopian epic, asserts that Solomon's son by the Queen of Sheba, Menelik I, smuggled his father's body to Axum, where it was interred in a secret chamber beneath a church. Local tradition points to the Church of St. Mary of Zion, guarded by monks who vow the tomb's contents include the Ark of the Covenant itself. While mainstream archaeology dismisses this as legend, the story persists, fueled by Ethiopia's ancient Jewish connections and the uncanny resemblance between Aksumite architecture and descriptions of Solomon's temple. So why the divide? The answer lies in how we view Solomon himself. In Jerusalem, he's the monarch who united Israel. In Ethiopia, he's a figure woven into national identity. Archaeology hasn't settled the debate. No inscription or artifact definitively links either site to Solomon. But the search reveals something deeper, how tombs become symbols, anchors for cultural memory. Whether beneath the Temple Mount's contested stones or Axum's shadowy chapels, Solomon's missing grave is less about bones and more about the stories we cling to. Until someone uncovers irrefutable proof, the wise king's final secret remains exactly where he might have wanted it, just beyond our grasp. Hannibal Barca's life was a masterclass in defiance, a general who marched elephants over the Alps, humbled Rome, and reshaped the ancient world. But his death, that's where history grows murky. After Carthage's defeat, the legendary commander spent his final years as a fugitive, bouncing between foreign courts, always one step ahead of Roman assassins. When his pursuers finally cornered him in the year 183 BC, the man who'd once brought an empire to its knees chose poison over surrender. Yet even in death, Hannibal refused to make things easy for his enemies. His burial became as elusive as his tactics, sparking a debate that stretches from the deserts of North Africa to the rugged coasts of Turkey. The most persistent theory places his tomb in modern-day Jebs, Turkey, near the villa where he spent his last days. Ancient historian Livy claimed locals erected a marble monument there, inscribed with the words Hannibal himself supposedly dictated, "No man need wonder what I was or where I lie." But dig into the details and contradictions emerge. The site Livy describes vanished long ago, swallowed by time or perhaps destroyed by Romans determined to erase their greatest adversary's memory. Modern excavations have turned up nothing conclusive, no inscriptions, no artifacts bearing his name. Then there's Libya's claim. The town of Libisa, now part of modern Algeria, boasts a crumbling mausoleum locals insist is Hannibal's. 19th century travelers reported seeing a stone coffin there, though it disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Could it have held the general's remains? The geography fits. Libya was Carthaginian territory, a fitting resting place for a patriot. But without physical evidence, the theory remains as ephemeral as desert mirages. The wildest twist, some scholars argue Hannibal was never buried at all. Plutarch hints his body was secretly returned to Carthage, burned on a pyre whose ashes were scattered at sea, a final act of subterfuge to deny Rome the satisfaction of a grave to desecrate. It's a poetic end for a man who lived by cunning, his physical legacy dissolving into the waves like the warships he once commanded. What makes this mystery so compelling isn't just the location of bones, but what they represent. Hannibal's tomb, if found, could rewrite Carthage's story from the losing side's perspective. Imagine uncovering personal effects, a dagger, a battle map, even the poison vial that ended his life, artifacts that humanized the legend. For now, the earth keeps its secrets, whether beneath Turkish soil, Libyan stone, or lost to the Mediterranean's depths. Hannibal's final maneuver was his most brilliant, vanishing so completely that even in death he remains unbeaten. Ramses VIII is one of ancient Egypt's greatest enigmas, a pharaoh who ruled at the twilight of the new kingdom's power, yet left behind almost no trace of his reign. Unlike his predecessors, whose grand tombs dot the Valley of the Kings, Ramses VIII's burial site has never been found. Not a single artifact, not a scrap of inscription, not even a definitive mention in later records points to where he was laid to rest. For a civilization that meticulously documented its rulers, this absence isn't just puzzling, it's a glaring omission. So what happened to the tomb of Egypt's forgotten king? Theories swirl around the Valley of the Kings, where so many pharaohs were interred. One possibility is that Ramses VIII's tomb was repurposed, its original contents erased to make way for a later burial. This wasn't uncommon in eras of political instability, when tombs were recycled to save resources or erase unpopular rulers from memory. The chaos of the late 20th dynasty, with its succession struggles and economic decline, would have provided the perfect motive. Another grim possibility, the tomb was looted so thoroughly that even its location was lost. Ancient robbers, sometimes working with corrupt officials, stripped burial chambers of valuables and left little behind to identify the original occupant. Without the usual markers, a sarcophagus, funerary texts, or cartouches, the tomb could have faded into the valley's labyrinth of undiscovered passages. But there's a darker twist. Some scholars speculate Ramses VIII might never have received a proper tomb at all. His reign was short, possibly just a year or two, and Egypt was fraying at the edges: foreign invasions, internal strife, and dwindling resources. In such turbulent times, a rushed burial in an unmarked chamber, or even a usurped grave meant for someone else, isn't out of the question. The lack of monuments or inscriptions praising his rule suggests he may have been deliberately sidelined, his memory suppressed by rivals or successors eager to consolidate power. Modern technology hasn't yet cracked the case. Ground-penetrating radar and thermal imaging have revealed hidden chambers in the Valley of the Kings, but none definitively tied to Ramses VIII. The challenge is compounded by the valley's geology. Collapsed tunnels, floods, and earthquakes have reshaped the landscape over millennia. even if his tomb exists, it could be buried under tons of debris or concealed behind older, more prominent structures. Yet the search matters because of what it represents. Finding Ramses VIII's tomb wouldn't just fill a gap in Egypt's royal timeline, it could shed light on the dynasty's unraveling. Was his burial modest because of decline, or was it a victim of the turbulence that would soon plunge Egypt into obscurity? Until the valley yields its secret, Ramses VIII remains a ghost pharaoh, a ruler whose greatest legacy might be the mystery of his own disappearance. Emperor Jovian's reign lasted barely 8 months, but his death was as dramatic as his unexpected rise to power. The year was 364, and Rome was reeling from the sudden passing of his predecessor, Julian the Apostate, during a disastrous campaign against Persia. Jovian, a relatively obscure military officer, found himself thrust onto the throne amid chaos, only to meet an equally mysterious end just as he was leading the battered empire back to stability. History remembers him as the emperor who signed a humiliating peace treaty to save his army, but his burial remains one of Rome's quietest vanishing acts. The circumstances of his death read like a tragic accident or something far more sinister. While journeying through Anatolia toward Constantinople, Jovian stopped for the night in a small town called Dadistana. According to the historian Ammianus Marcellinus, he retired to his quarters after a meal, only to be found dead the next morning. Some accounts claim he suffocated from carbon monoxide poisoning, his room poorly ventilated after a charcoal brazier was left burning. Others whisper of assassination, suggesting political rivals or disgruntled soldiers silenced a leader they saw as weak, but the most haunting detail. His body was never returned to Rome for a state burial. Instead, he was interred somewhere along that remote frontier, a resting place lost to time. The search for Jovian's tomb hinges on fragments of ancient texts and the rugged geography of modern Turkey. Dadistana's exact location is debated, with scholars placing it somewhere between Ankara and Nicomedia. 19th-century explorers scoured the region for clues, turning up Roman-era ruins but no definitive grave. The likeliest scenario is that his followers, eager to continue their march home, buried him hastily in an unmarked roadside tomb a far cry from the grand mausoleums of earlier emperors. Without a monument or inscription, the site faded into obscurity, overlooked even by later pilgrims or treasure hunters. What makes this mystery particularly poignant is the context of Jovian's rule. He inherited an empire in crisis, forced to surrender key territories to Persia to secure his army's retreat. His death robbed Rome of a leader who might have stabilized the fracturing empire, and his anonymous burial symbolized the empire's dwindling grandeur. Finding his tomb wouldn't just solve an archaeological puzzle, it would shed light on a pivotal moment when Rome's dominance began to unravel. Imagine uncovering artifacts from that desperate retreat, a tarnished imperial seal, a soldier's journal, or even the hastily drafted peace treaty that reshaped the ancient world. Yet the earth keeps its secrets. Modern roads and villages now cover much of the suspected burial zone, making large-scale excavations impossible. Ground-penetrating radar might one day reveal a hidden chamber, but for now, Jovian lies in the empire's shadowlands, a fleeting emperor whose final chapter is as elusive as his legacy. His grave, if it still exists, is a silent witness to the moment Rome's infinite certainty began to crack. Queen Himiko of ancient Japan stands as a shadow in the mist, a ruler so enigmatic that historians still argue whether she was a flesh and blood monarch or a figure woven from legend. The 3rd century Chinese text, the Weizhai, describes her as a shaman queen who wielded divine authority over a land called Yamatai, pacifying warring clans through spiritual power rather than brute force. She reportedly sent envoys to China, exchanging gifts with the Cao Wei dynasty, yet her own people left no written records of her reign. This silence makes the search for her tomb a detective story with missing clues and competing theories, each one shaped by the politics of modern Japan as much as by ancient history. The debate hinges on one contentious question: where was Yamatai? Some scholars place it in northern Kyushu, pointing to archaeological finds like bronze mirrors linked to Queen Himiko's era. Others argue for the Kinai region near modern Nara, where later Japanese rulers established their capitals. The Nara theory gained traction in the 20th century when a massive keyhole-shaped coffin burial mound, Hashihoka, was proposed as Himiko's possible resting place. The timing fits. Hashihoka dates to the mid-3rd century, right when Himiko would have died, and its sheer size suggests someone of extraordinary status. But here's the catch: excavating it is forbidden. Imperial household agency regulations protect these mounds as sacred ancestral sites, leaving archaeologists to piece together clues from surface surveys and scattered artifacts. What little we know about Himiko's burial comes from the Waijai, which claims her people built a massive tomb guarded by 100 servants sacrificed to accompany her into the afterlife. If true, Hashihoka's untouched chambers could hold unimaginable treasures, ceremonial weapons, early Haniwa clay figures, or even evidence of Japan's transition from shamanic rule to centralized monarchy. But without physical exploration, the mound remains a locked door. The mystery deepens when you consider the cultural stakes. For centuries, Japan's imperial lineage has traced itself back to the sun goddess Amaterasu, sidelining figures like Himiko, who represented an older matriarchal tradition. Could this be why her tomb and her legacy were downplayed? Some historians suggest Yamatai's later absorption by the Yamato state led to deliberate erasure, her story rewritten to fit a new national myth. Modern technology offers faint hope. Ground-penetrating radar scans of Hashihoka reveal a stone chamber deep within, but whether it holds Himiko or another elite remains uncertain. Meanwhile, rival theories persist. A shrine in Kyoto claims her spirit resides there, while a village in Soga Prefecture insists their local mound is the true site. The truth may lie somewhere between a queen whose reality faded into legend, her grave as elusive as the fog that clings to Japan's oldest forests. Until the barriers to excavation lift, Himiko's final secret stays sealed beneath layers of earth and politics, a ghost waiting for her story to be unearthed. Suleiman the Magnificent's final campaign was meant to be his crowning glory, the Ottoman Empire's legendary sultan, marching into Hungary at the age of 71, determined to crush the fortress of Shajdvar and extend his dominion deeper into Europe. But fate had other plans. On the night of September 6, 1566, just before the fortress fell, Suleiman died in his tent. The circumstances were almost too poetic. A ruler who'd spent 46 years reshaping the world, perishing on the brink of victory, his death kept secret to prevent chaos in the ranks. What happened next was a masterclass in imperial intrigue, a burial so clandestine that even now, centuries later, historians are piecing together the puzzle. The official story goes like this. Suleiman's body was embalmed, then transported back to Constantinople for a grand burial beside the Suleimani Mosque, the architectural masterpiece he'd commissioned. But that's only half the truth. In a move steeped in symbolism, his inner circle made a startling decision. They removed his heart and buried it on the spot, beneath his campaign tent near Shajdvar. The rest of his body completed the journey home, but his heart stayed in Hungary, a silent sentinel over the land he'd fought to conquer. Why this elaborate division? For the Ottomans, the heart wasn't just an organ, it was the seat of courage, the essence of a ruler's spirit. By leaving it in enemy territory, Suleiman's followers were making a statement. Even in death, their sultan would watch over his conquest. For centuries, the exact location of his heart's burial was a mystery. Then, in 2015, Hungarian and Turkish archaeologists made a breakthrough. Using historical accounts and ground-penetrating radar, they pinpointed the site, a field near Shajdvar where Suleiman's tent once stood. Beneath the unassuming soil, they found the foundations of a small Ottoman-era structure, likely a memorial tomb destroyed later by Habsburg forces. Nearby, fragments of pottery and metalwork from the 16th century hinted at the site's significance. But the real clincher, a local legend about a Turk's grave that had persisted for generations, passed down by villagers who had no idea whose heart might lie beneath their feet. The separate burial wasn't just about symbolism, it was about survival. Keeping Suleiman's death a secret during the siege was crucial to maintaining morale. If the troops had known their sultan was gone, the campaign could have unraveled. By the time the truth emerged, the empire had already secured succession, with Selim II taking the throne without upheaval. But the hidden burial also had a darker consequence. Without a marked grave, Suleiman's heart shrine faded from memory, its legacy preserved only in cryptic Ottoman chronicles. Even today, the site bears no grand monument, just a quiet patch of earth that once held the heart of an emperor. What makes this mystery so compelling isn't just the tactical genius behind it, but what it reveals about Suleiman himself. Here was a ruler so larger than life that even his remains demanded two resting places, one for the empire he built and one for the battles he never finished. Finding his heart's burial doesn't just solve a historical riddle, it uncovers the emotional calculus of an empire at its peak. The man who penned love letters to his wife Roxolana, who reformed laws and patronized art, also understood the raw power of myth. In the end, Suleiman the Magnificent didn't just leave a tomb, he left a legacy carved into the land itself, half in glory, half in shadow. King Croesus of Lydia wasn't just rich, he was the reason we say, as rich as Croesus. His name became synonymous with wealth itself, thanks to the rivers of gold that flowed through his kingdom in what's now Turkey. But for all his opulence, his final resting place remains as elusive as the true extent of his fortune. The Greek historian Herodotus left us a tantalizing clue. Croesus was buried in a grand tomb near Sardis, his capital, complete with marble lions and inscriptions boasting of his reign. Yet centuries of searching have turned up empty, no tomb, no lions, no golden epitaph. So where did one of history's wealthiest kings disappear? The hunt begins at Bin Teep, a sprawling necropolis outside Sardis where Lydia's elite were laid to rest. Towering earthen mounds dot the landscape, some as tall as 5-story buildings, likely the graves of Croesus's royal predecessors. But his archaeologists have their eyes on one particular mound, known as the Tomb of Aliats, Croesus's father. It's the largest in the region, a monument so imposing it was mentioned by ancient travelers. Some speculate Croesus might have been buried nearby, perhaps in an equally grand but undiscovered chamber. Yet excavations over the years have yielded no definitive proof, just fragments of pottery and the occasional weathered stone. Then there's the twist in Croesus's story, his fall from grace. After his defeat by the Persian King Cyrus the Great, legends diverge. Some say Cyrus spared him, keeping him as an advisor. Others claim he died in the chaos, his tomb hastily constructed by loyalists. If true, his burial might have been deliberately modest to avoid attracting Persian looters. Or worse, his grave could have been destroyed outright, erased by conquerors eager to humiliate the man who'd once been the envy of the ancient world. Modern technology offers a glimmer of hope. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed hidden chambers beneath Bin Teep's mounds, and satellite imagery identifies potential unexcavated sites. But the challenge isn't just technical, it's political. Much of the area sits on private land or near modern villages, making large-scale digs difficult. And even if Croesus's tomb were found, would we recognize it? Lydian burial customs blended Greek and Anatolian traditions, leaving no rigid blueprint for archaeologists to follow. The deeper irony, Croesus's wealth might be his tomb's undoing. If his grave was as lavish as Herodotus claimed, it would have been a magnet for thieves. The gold-lined walls, the jeweled sarcophagus, all could have been stripped centuries ago, leaving only echoes in the earth. Yet the search continues, driven by more than just treasure. Finding Croesus's tomb would mean touching the legacy of a king who straddled myth and history, a man whose name still defines prosperity. Until then, his burial remains the ultimate paradox, a king who embodied abundance, yet left no trace of his own end. Emperor Valerian's fate stands as one of Rome's most brutal humiliations, a ruler who didn't just lose a battle but became a trophy for his enemies. In the year 260, Valerian led the empire's armies against Persia's Shapur I, only to suffer catastrophic defeat at Edessa. Captured alive, he entered history not as a martyr or a fallen hero, but as a pawn in a conqueror's cruel spectacle. Ancient sources like the historian Lactantius claim Shapur used Valerian as a human footstool, forcing the emperor to kneel so the Persian king could step on his back while mounting his horse. Even more grotesque, rumors swirled that after Valerian's death his skin was stripped, dyed red, and displayed in a Persian temple as a grisly warning to Rome. With remains treated as propaganda, it's no wonder no tomb was ever built. But what really happened to the emperor's body? The Persian perspective offers chilling contradictions. Shapur's own inscriptions at Naksh-e-Rostam boast of capturing Valerian but say nothing of desecration. Instead, they depict the emperor groveling at the king's feet, a living symbol of Persian dominance. Some scholars argue the skin-stretching story was Roman propaganda, crafted to galvanize hatred against Persia. Others point to Zoroastrian burial customs, which considered dead flesh impure, making it unlikely Shapur would have preserved Valerian's remains at all. The most plausible scenario, his body was discarded anonymously, left to rot in some unmarked pit while his armor and regalia were paraded as spoils. Rome's reaction to the loss was a mix of horror and deliberate silence. No effort was made to recover Valerian's remains, a stark contrast to the elaborate rituals afforded other fallen emperors. The Senate declared his son Gallienus sole ruler, erasing Valerian from official monuments in a quiet damnatio memoriae. This erasure wasn't just about shame, it was practical. Admitting an emperor could be reduced to a footstool would shatter the illusion of imperial invincibility. Better to let the story fade than risk rebellions fueled by humiliation. Yet the mystery lingers because of what it represents. Valerian's fate wasn't just personal, it marked a turning point. His capture shattered Rome's aura of inevitability, emboldening enemies across the empire. Finding his remains, if they exist, wouldn't just solve a historical puzzle, it would force us to confront the fragility of power. Was his gruesome end pure brutality or strategic theater designed to break Roman morale? The earth might never yield an answer, but the question itself haunts us. How far can an empire fall when its gods and its emperors prove mortal after all? Queen Tamar of Georgia wasn't just a ruler, she was the heartbeat of a nation's golden age, a queen who expanded borders, patronized the arts, and forged an empire that stretched from the Black Sea to the Caspian. Yet for all her accomplishments, her final resting place has become a battleground of theories, each more contentious than the last. Did she lie in a sunlit cathedral, as tradition claims, or was her body spirited away to a secret mountain vault, hidden from the Mongols who sought to erase her legacy? The debate isn't just about geography, it's about identity, about how Georgia remembers the woman who defined its zenith. Start with the official story. The medieval Georgian chronicles insist Tamar was buried at Gelati Monastery, a UNESCO-listed masterpiece she herself endowed. Pilgrims for centuries have knelt before a stone slab there, believed to mark her grave. But dig deeper and cracks appear in the narrative. When archaeologists examined the site in the 20th century, they found the tomb empty, no bones, no artifacts, just the hollow echo of history. Some argue her remains were moved during invasions, a common fate for revered relics. Others whisper something more deliberate, that Tamar's loyal advisors, fearing Mongol desecration, staged a false burial at Gelati while hiding her true resting place in the wilds of the Caucasus. That's where the legends take over, high in the mountains of Svaneti, a remote region where medieval watchtowers still pierce the sky, locals tell of a hidden crypt carved into the rock. According to folklore, Tamer's body was smuggled there under cover of night, sealed behind a door that only opens for those pure of heart. The tale might sound like romantic fiction, except for the eerie details. Svaneti's isolation preserved traditions lost elsewhere in Georgia, and its churches guard ornate 12th century frescoes of Tamer, suggesting an enduring connection. Even more compelling, Soviet expeditions in the 1960s reported finding a sealed chamber in the area, though political pressures halted further exploration before its contents could be revealed. Then there's the darkest theory that Tamer's tomb no longer exists at all. The Mongols weren't just conquerors, they were erasers of history, melting down sacred objects and burning manuscripts. If they'd discovered her grave, would they have left any trace? Some historians point to the ruins of Vadzia, the cave city Tamer used as a wartime stronghold. Its tunnels, once filled with the glow of her court, now lie in rubble, ravaged by earthquakes and invaders. Could her burial site have been among the casualties, lost beneath collapsed limestone and dust? The search for Tamer's tomb isn't just about recovering bones. It's about reclaiming a narrative. For Georgians, she's more than a historical figure. She's a symbol of resilience, a queen who defied Byzantine emperors and Seljuk sultans alike. Finding her grave would mean touching the physical remnants of that defiance, whether in a monastery's quiet shadows or a mountain's icy grip. Until then, the mystery persists, as layered and unyielding as the land she once ruled. Every empty tomb, every whispered legend is a reminder. Some legacies refuse to be buried. King Agamemnon, the name alone, conjures images of golden masks, Trojan wars, and a ruler so mighty his very tomb should be impossible to miss. Yet separating the man from the myth has proven to be one of archaeology's greatest challenges. Homer's epics paint him as the commander of the Greek forces at Troy, a king whose return home ended in betrayal and bloodshed. But did he ever exist outside those verses? And if so, where did his people lay him to rest? The search for Agamemnon's tomb is a collision of poetry and spades, where legend often drowns out the whispers of the dirt. Enter Heinrich Schliemann, the self-taught archaeologist whose name is forever tied to this mystery. In 1876, he blasted through the ancient citadel of Mycenae, convinced Homer's stories were literal truth. What he found sent shockwaves through the academic world. A shaft grave filled with skeletal remains and treasures, including a gold funeral mask he famously declared was the face of Agamemnon. The mask, with its hauntingly serene expression, became an instant icon proof. Schliemann argued that the Trojan War's heroes were real, but here's the problem. Modern science has since dated those graves to the 16th century BC, nearly 300 years before the Trojan War supposedly took place. That gold mask, it belonged to someone far older, a forgotten king whose name vanished long before Homer sang his first verse. So where does that leave Agamemnon? The truth is, Mycenae's ruins hold more questions than answers. The so-called Tomb of Agamemnon, a massive beehive-shaped Tholos tomb just outside the citadel, isn't his either. It dates to the 13th century BC, closer to the Trojan era but still lacking any inscription or artifact that ties it to the legendary king. Scholars now suspect Agamemnon, if he existed at all, was likely a composite figure, a memory of Mycenae's powerful warlords woven into epic poetry centuries later. His tomb might be nothing more than a collective metaphor, a symbolic resting place for Greece's heroic age. Yet the hunt hasn't ended. Recent excavations at Mycenae have uncovered lesser-known graves and unplundered chambers, some still sealed beneath millennia of debris. Could one of these hold the real Agamemnon? The odds are slim, but the allure is irresistible. Imagine uncovering a weapon inscribed with his name or a tablet referencing the siege of Troy. Until then, the mask Schliemann lifted from the earth remains a potent symbol not of Agamemnon, but of our endless fascination with the blurred line between myth and history. The king's tomb, if it exists, is still out there, waiting for someone to read Homer's clues with fresh eyes, or perhaps to admit that some heroes live forever in song, not stone. Emperor Maximilian I of Habsburg orchestrated his legacy with the precision of a chess grandmaster, except when it came to his own burial. The man who expanded Habsburg territories through shrewd marriages and relentless diplomacy couldn't secure a single, dignified resting place for himself. Instead, his remains were scattered like pawns across Austria, a macabre reflection of the empire he'd stitched together, but the most striking detail. His heart wasn't just metaphorically absent from his tomb, it was physically removed, enshrined hundreds of miles away from the rest of his body. The story begins in the year 1519, when Maximilian succumbed to illness while preparing yet another campaign. True to his lifelong obsession with pageantry, he'd already designed his own funeral monument down to the last bronze relief. What he hadn't planned was the logistical nightmare that followed. His will contained an unusual demand. His heart was to be sent to Bruges, the city of his beloved first wife, Mary of Burgundy, while his entrails would stay in Wiener Neustadt, near the castle where he'd taken his last breath. The rest of him, that was destined for Innsbruck, beneath a monumental tomb adorned with larger-than-life bronze statues of his ancestors, a final statement of Habsburg supremacy. Why this bizarre division, part royal tradition, part political theater? Medieval and Renaissance rulers often split their remains as a way to claim multiple territories in death, their bodily fragments acting as spiritual anchors for dynastic power. But Maximilian took it further. By sending his heart to Bruges, he was reinforcing his connection to Burgundy, a wealthy region crucial to Habsburg dominance. His entrails in Wiener Neustadt honored his Austrian roots, while the grand Innsbruck tomb served as a tourist attraction centuries before the concept existed, a propaganda piece carved in bronze. The irony, the tomb in Innsbruck stood empty for decades after his death. The intricate bronze figures meant to surround his sarcophagus took so long to cast that Maximilian's mummified body had to be stored in a cellar until the project was completed. When workers finally placed him beneath the monument, they discovered a grisly oversight. The sarcophagus was too small. His corpse, preserved with lime and herbs, had to be crammed unceremoniously into the space, breaking bones in the process. The emperor, who'd micromanaged every detail of his legacy, was literally bent to fit the narrative. Today, visiting Maximilian's scattered remains feels like piecing together a puzzle. In Bruges, a modest silver urn in the Church of Our Lady marks where his heart once rested, though the actual organ mysteriously vanished during the French Revolution, likely stolen or destroyed. Wiener Neustadt St. George's Cathedral still houses the urn with his entrails, though few tourists bother to seek it out, and Innsbruck's Hofkirche. The tomb is there, breathtaking in its artistry, but the man himself is little more than a whisper beneath the bronze. What makes this saga so compelling isn't just the eccentricity, it's the symbolism. Maximilian's fractured burial mirrors the Habsburg Empire itself, a patchwork of lands held together by marriage and ambition, never fully unified. Even in death, he couldn't resist political calculation, using his own body as a territorial claim. Yet for all his planning, history reduced him to fragments, his grand vision undermined by practical blunders and the ravages of time. The emperor who sought to control everything, in the end, couldn't even control his own corpse. Queen Zenobia of Palmyra refused to fade quietly into history. Even in defeat, she ensured her story would outlast Rome's attempts to erase it. In the year 272, the warrior queen who dared carve her own empire from the eastern deserts found herself paraded through Rome's streets in golden chains, a trophy for Emperor Aurelian's triumph. Yet the haunting question lingers: what became of her after that humiliation? Ancient historians offer tantalizing fragments, each more contradictory than the last. Some claim she was granted a villa in Tibur, living out her days in genteel exile. Others insist she starved herself rather than endure captivity. But the most enduring mystery isn't how she died, it's where her body and her defiance were laid to rest. Consider the stakes of her disappearance. Zenobia wasn't just another conquered ruler. She was a woman who challenged Rome's might while cloaked in the aura of Cleopatra's legacy. For Aureline, allowing her a marked tomb risked creating a pilgrimage site for rebels, yet obliterating her remains entirely might have sparked unrest among Palmyra's survivors. The solution: a vanishing act. If the accounts of her Tibur exile are true, her burial could lie beneath what's now the Italian countryside, perhaps near Hadrian's villa, where other Eastern nobles were interred. But excavations there have yielded no trace, no inscriptions, no sarcophagus fragments bearing her name. Then there's Palmyra itself. The ruins of her oasis kingdom still stand in Syria's deserts, their honey-colored stones whispering of her brief, blazing reign. Local folklore insists Zenobia's loyalists smuggled her body home under cover of night, burying her in an unmarked grave to evade Roman desecration. Modern archaeologists have scoured Palmyra's Valley of Tombs, where tower-like mausoleums house the city's elite, yet none bear her insignia. The brutal truth: much of Palmyra's necropolis was looted centuries ago, its treasures scattered, its identity erased by time and conquest. The wildest theory suggests Zenobia never left Rome at all. A 14th century chronicle mentions a curious sarcophagus discovered near the Via Appia, inscribed with a single word in Greek: Zenobia. The coffin vanished during the Renaissance, leaving scholars to wonder, was this the Queen's secret resting place, hidden in plain sight among Rome's dead? Without forensic evidence, the lead is cold, but the symbolism is irresistible. A rebel queen sleeping eternally in the empire's shadow, her presence as defiant in death as in life. What makes this search so gripping is the woman at its center. Zenobia wasn't just a prisoner of war, she was a cultural lightning rod, a ruler who blended Roman, Greek, and Arab traditions to forge something entirely her own. Finding her tomb could rewrite the story of Rome's eastern frontier, offering artifacts that reveal how she saw herself, as heir to Cleopatra, challenger to emperors, or something far more complex. Until then, her grave remains as elusive as her ambition, a missing piece in the puzzle of a queen who dared to dream bigger than her chains. The battlefield at Hastings in 1066 didn't just decide the fate of England, it erased a king from history. Harold II, the last Anglo-Saxon ruler, fell that October day with an arrow through his eye, or so the Bayeux Tapestry famously claims. But what happened to his body afterward is a riddle wrapped in medieval propaganda and centuries of national myth-making. The Normans had every reason to vanish his remains, while the English clung to tales of secret burials and sacred resurrections. Was Harold dumped in an unmarked grave by his conquerors, or does he rest beneath the quiet stones of Waltham Abbey, a martyr to a lost cause? Let's untangle the conflicting accounts. William the Conqueror's chroniclers insisted Harold's corpse was so mutilated after the battle that only his mistress could identify it by certain marks known only to her. They claimed William, in a rare gesture of chivalry, allowed Harold's mother to retrieve the body for a price. She supposedly offered its weight in gold, but William, either magnanimous or mocking, refused the payment and let her take it anyway. Yet here's where the trail goes cold. Norman sources abruptly stop mentioning Harold's burial, as if the very earth swallowed him. That silence speaks volumes. For the new regime, letting Harold's grave become a pilgrimage site would have been dangerous, a rallying point for rebellion. Better to let the man who nearly thwarted the conquest vanish without a trace. But England's dispossessed had other ideas. Within decades, a counter-narrative emerged centered on Waltham Abbey, a church Harold had rebuilt and loved. Legend says loyal monks smuggled his body from Hastings under cover of night, bringing it north for a proper Christian burial. By the 12th century, Waltham's monks were confidently showing visitors a tomb they claimed held Harold, though curiously, they never opened it to prove the point. Skeptics argue the story was pure political theatre, crafted to bolster the abbey's prestige and quietly keep Anglo-Saxon memory alive under Norman rule. Yet there's a tantalizing clue. Excavations in the 1950s revealed a coffin beneath the abbey ruins, its orientation deliberately breaking Norman-era conventions, as if the burial was hiding something. The debate isn't just about bones, it's about legitimacy. If Harold lies at Waltham, his grave becomes a symbol of England's stubborn resistance to foreign rule, a thread connecting the pre- and post-conquest worlds. If he was obliterated on William's orders, it's proof of the Normans' ruthless efficiency in rewriting history. Modern science could settle this. DNA testing on the Waltham remains, if they exist, could compare them to known descendants of Harold's family. But the Church of England has blocked any exhumation, leaving archaeologists to pore over ground-penetrating radar scans and faded manuscripts for answers. Perhaps the most poignant theory isn't about location but intention. Some historians suggest Harold's followers never expected to preserve his body, they wanted to preserve the idea of him. By leaving his final resting place ambiguous, they created a legend that couldn't be pinned down or destroyed. In that sense, Harold's grave is wherever the English imagine it to be, a blank space on the map where history and hope collide. The king who lost everything might have won one final victory, ensuring that even 9 centuries later we're still searching for him. Emperor Nepos might be the most important Roman ruler you've never heard of, a man clinging to the crumbling edge of an empire, his death marking not just the end of a reign but the flicker before the flame went out entirely. By the year 480, the Western Roman Empire was a shadow of itself, its territories whittled down to little more than Italy and Dalmatia, its throne a revolving door of puppet emperors and barbarian generals. Nepos, a relative of the Eastern Emperor, was sent west to restore order, but his reign lasted barely a year before he was overthrown by his own military commander, Orst. Forced to flee to Dalmatia, Nepos became emperor in exile, a ruler without a realm until his assassination in 480. Yet the real mystery isn't how he died, it's where his body ended up. Dalmatia, the rugged coastal region of modern-day Croatia, became Nepos's final stronghold. Ancient sources like the historian Malchus mention his murder at the hands of disloyal retainers, but they're frustratingly silent about his burial. This wasn't just oversight, it was symbolic. By the late 5th century, Rome's emperors were no longer laid to rest in grand mausoleums. The tradition of imperial tombs had unraveled along with the empire itself. Nepos likely received a modest, even hurried burial, somewhere near his villa in Salona, Dalmatia's capital. But Salona's ruins, though extensively excavated, have yielded no trace of him. No sarcophagus, no inscriptions, not even a whisper in local folklore. The absence speaks volumes. Nepos's successor, Romulus Augustulus, is often called the last Roman emperor, but technically, Nepos held the title until his death. Romulus was just a boy, a figurehead deposed by the barbarian king Odoacer in 476, the event traditionally marking Rome's fall. Yet Nepos, still alive in Dalmatia, represented a flicker of legitimacy, a thread connecting the empire to its past. Odoacer even minted coins in Nepos's name, a grudging nod to continuity. When Nepos was killed, that thread snapped. No wonder his grave vanished. It was the burial of an idea as much as a man. Archaeological clues are sparse but tantalizing. Salona's early Christian cemeteries, where nobles and officials were interred, contain unmarked graves that could belong to Nepos or his circle. One theory suggests his body was secretly moved to the Eastern Empire, perhaps to Constantinople, where his relatives still held power. Another hints at a maritime burial, his remains cast into the Adriatic to avoid desecration by rivals. But the most compelling possibility is also the simplest. His tomb, if it ever stood out, was repurposed or demolished centuries ago, its stones recycled into the walls of medieval churches or Venetian fortresses. What makes this search so poignant is what Nepos represents: the quiet, unheroic end of something monumental. He wasn't a great reformer or a tragic martyr. He was a bureaucrat in a collapsing system, trying to hold together a world that had already moved on. Finding his tomb wouldn't just solve an archaeological puzzle, it would force us to confront the banality of empire's end. Not with a bang, but with a forgotten grave in a provincial backwater, where the last emperor of Rome became just another unnamed stone in the dark. King Erik IX of Sweden, known as Erik the Holy or Erik the Lawgiver, stands at the crossroads of faith and folklore, a warrior king turned martyr whose bones became relics before his grave was ever properly found. Unlike rulers whose tombs vanished through neglect or conquest, Erik's burial is a mystery by design, tangled in the politics of sainthood. His death in the year 1160 was brutal, ambushed by Danish rivals while attending Mass, struck down on the very altar steps where he'd knelt in prayer. But the chaos that followed his murder didn't just scatter his followers, it scattered the truth about where his body truly rested. For centuries, Uppsala Cathedral has claimed Erik's remains, displaying an ornate silver sarcophagus said to hold his bones. Pilgrims still flock there, tracing fingers over the reliquary's intricate engravings of his martyrdom. Yet historians whisper a thorny contradiction: this shrine might be empty. Contemporary accounts describe his original burial as hurried, his corpse hidden by loyalists in the nearby marshes to prevent Danish desecration. By the time the church recovered his body for canonization decades later, no one could say for certain where it had lain. The relics venerated today might belong to someone else entirely, or worse, be a patchwork of bones assembled to sanctify a legend. The debate hinges on a single, grisly clue. When Erik's alleged remains were exhumed in the 14th century, witnesses reported the skull bore a deep gash matching the axe blow that killed him. But forensic studies in the 1940s cast doubt the skeleton showed signs of multiple injuries inconsistent with the martyrdom story. Some scholars argue these bones belong to an earlier, nameless warrior, repurposed to bolster Sweden's national saint. Others counter that fragmentation could stem from rough handling during medieval exhumations or even later tampering by relic hunters. The truth might lie beneath Uppsala's very foundations. Recent ground-penetrating radar scans revealed a network of undiscovered crypts under the cathedral, some predating Erik's era. Could one of these hidden chambers hold his original, unvarnished grave? The church has resisted further investigation, citing reverence for the site, but the reluctance only fuels speculation. Erik's cult was as much about power as piety. His sainthood legitimized Sweden's fledgling monarchy, turning a slain king into a celestial ally. What if the real tomb undermines that narrative, revealing a less sanitized version of his death? What makes this search so charged is what Erik represents. He wasn't just a king, he was a symbol of Sweden's messy transition from pagan warlords to Christian statehood. His laws, which protected the poor and enforced church tithes, reshaped the kingdom, but his martyrdom reshaped its soul. Finding his true burial site wouldn't just solve an archaeological puzzle, it would force a reckoning with how saints are made and who gets to write their stories. Until then, the silver reliquary gleams in Uppsala's dim light, a beautiful casket for a mystery that refuses to stay buried. Queen Mavia of the Tanakids wasn't just a ruler. She was a desert storm in human form, a warrior queen who defied Rome's might and rewrote the rules of power in the 4th century. Leading her nomadic Arab confederation across the sands of what's now Syria and Jordan, she waged a guerrilla war so fierce it forced Emperor Valens to sue for peace. Yet for all her battlefield brilliance, the earth has swallowed every trace of her final resting place. Unlike the monumental tombs of other ancient leaders, Mavia's grave vanishes into the desert silence, as if she chose one last act of defiance against the empires that tried to erase her. The mystery begins with the scarcity of records. Most of what we know about Mavia comes from fragmented accounts by Roman historians like Rufinus and Socrates Scholasticus, who grudgingly admired her tactical genius. They describe her victories in vivid detail, how she outmaneuvered Roman legions, besieged cities, and even secured her daughter's marriage to a prominent Christian bishop to consolidate influence. But when it comes to her death and burial, the chronicles fall silent. This absence isn't accidental. Mavia's people, the Tanakids, were nomads who left few permanent structures. Their kings and queens were often buried in unmarked desert graves, their locations known only to trusted kin. Add the relentless passage of time, and the trail grows colder than a Syrian night. One theory suggests Mavia's tomb lies near the ancient caravan city of Palmyra, a strategic hub her forces once controlled. The surrounding desert is dotted with undiscovered Nabatean and Tanakid burial sites, their low stone cairns camouflaged by the shifting sands. Archaeologists have found similar graves nearby, simple but dignified, adorned with pottery and personal weapons, yet none can be definitively linked to her. Another possibility, she was interred in the lava fields of southern Syria, where the black basalt terrain mirrors the fierceness of her reign. Local Bedouin oral traditions sometimes mention a queen's grave in the region, but these stories are as elusive as mirages, fading when scrutinized. The deeper intrigue lies in what her missing tomb represents. Mavia wasn't just a warrior, she was a cultural bridge, a Christian convert who allied with Rome when it suited her but never surrendered her autonomy. She embodied the complex interplay of faith, power, and identity in the late antique world. Finding her burial site could reshape our understanding of pre-Islamic Arab kingdoms, not as fringe players, but as savvy political forces. Imagine uncovering artifacts that reveal how she blended Roman military tactics with tribal traditions, or how her faith influenced her rule. Yet the desert guards its secrets fiercely. Modern conflicts have made archaeological work in Syria perilous, and looting has ravaged potential sites. Even if Mavia's tomb survived intact, identifying it would require a needle in a haystack search across thousands of square miles, but perhaps that's fitting. A queen who lived by her own rules might prefer to remain untethered to a single patch of earth, her legacy carried not by stone markers, but by the winds that once carried her warriors into battle. Until the sands decide to yield their secret, Mavia's grave remains as enigmatic as the woman herself, a shadow in the sun, here and gone like a desert breeze. King Wamba's reign should have been a triumph, a Visigothic king who defended Spain against rebellions and foreign invasions, only to be undone by a bizarre twist of fate and a haircut. Crowned in the year 672, Wamba was a ruler of iron will, crushing uprisings in the north and fortifying his kingdom against the ever-looming threat of Muslim expansion. Yet his downfall wasn't defeat on the battlefield, it was a staged ritual that stripped him of power, leaving his final years shrouded in whispers and his grave lost to time. The mystery of Wamba's burial isn't just about a missing tomb, it's a window into the Visigothic world's fragile balance of church, state, and subterfuge. The strangest chapter of Wamba's story began in 680 when he was allegedly poisoned by his own courtiers. According to the chronicles, the conspirators slipped him a potion that induced a death-like coma, then rushed to tongue his hair, a sacred act in Visigothic custom that signified monastic vows and instantly disqualified him from kingship. When Wamba awoke, he found himself trapped by his own laws. A shorn head meant irreversible exile to a monastery. Whether this was an elaborate coup or a later fabrication to legitimize his successor remains debated, but the outcome was undeniable. Wamba vanished into the cloistered halls of the monastery of Pampliega, his political life severed as cleanly as his hair. So where did his body go? Pampliega, a small town in modern-day Burgos, claims his remains, yet the evidence is as thin as medieval parchment. The monastery itself was demolished centuries ago, its stones repurposed into village homes and farm walls. Local tradition insists Wamba was buried beneath its chapel, but excavations have turned up nothing definitive. Some historians argue his grave was deliberately obscured to prevent his memory from inspiring dissent. The Visigoths, after all, were no strangers to posthumous politics. Rival factions often desecrated the tombs of unpopular kings, and Wamba's forced abdication left his legacy contentious. But there's another layer to this mystery. In the 12th century, long after the Visigothic kingdom had fallen, a tomb in the city of Toledo was suddenly declared Wamba's, conveniently timed to bolster the prestige of Toledo's archbishops, who were positioning themselves as heirs to Visigothic legitimacy. The sarcophagus, ornate but clearly crafted centuries after Wamba's death, became a pilgrimage site. Modern testing confirmed the bones inside weren't his, leaving archaeologists to wonder, was this a case of mistaken identity or deliberate historical forgery? The search for Wamba's true resting place reveals more than just a missing grave. It underscores how power was negotiated in the early medieval world through rituals as subtle as a haircut and as bold as inventing a tomb. If his burial was hidden, it was because his enemies feared even a dead Wamba could inspire loyalty. If it was fabricated later, it was because someone needed his ghost to legitimize their authority. Today, the fields around Pampliega keep their silence, and Toledo's false sarcophagus sits empty of answers. The king who ruled with strength but fell to ceremony may have outsmarted history itself, vanishing so completely that even his bones refuse to tell the tale. Emperor Romulus Augustulus, the very name drips with historical irony. Here was a boy who bore the names of Rome's mythical founder and its first emperor, yet presided over nothing more than the empire's flickering embers. Deposed in the year 476 before he'd even grown a beard, his reign lasted barely 10 months, snuffed out by the Germanic warlord Odoacer with little fanfare. But the cruelest twist, the so-called last Roman emperor wasn't even granted the dignity of a known grave. His burial site, somewhere in Campania, is as forgotten as the empire he nominally ruled, a footnote in a story that had already written its final chapter. What makes Romulus's obscurity so haunting is the contrast with his predecessors. Think of Augustus, whose mausoleum still looms over Rome, or Hadrian, whose towering tomb became the fortress of popes. Even in decline, emperors like Honorius and Valentinian III received burials befitting their rank. But Romulus, ancient sources barely mention his fate after Odoacer exiled him to a villa near Naples, pensioning him off with a generous allowance but stripping him of imperial trappings. The message was clear: Rome no longer needed emperors. The boy who'd worn the purple was now just another landowner, his past erased as thoroughly as if he'd never existed. The search for his tomb is a study in frustration. Campania's lush hillsides are dotted with Roman-era villas, many repurposed or crumbling into the earth. Local legends in the town of Castel dell'Ovo whisper of an imperial youth buried beneath its medieval castle, but excavations have yielded nothing concrete. Other theories point to the ruins of Lucullus's legendary villa, where exiled aristocrats often spent their final days. Yet without inscriptions or artifacts, every lead dissolves like morning mist over the Bay of Naples. Perhaps the most telling clue lies in what we don't find. Unlike other deposed rulers whose graves became political symbols, Romulus's burial was deliberately unremarkable. Odoacer, now styling himself King of Italy, had no interest in martyring the boy. Better to let him fade quietly, a relic of a bygone era. Even the name Augustulus, meaning Little Augustus, was a dismissive jab, reducing the office to a hollow title. Yet in that very obscurity lies a profound truth. Romulus's missing grave isn't just an archaeological puzzle, it's a metaphor for Rome itself. The empire didn't fall with a single dramatic collapse. It dissipated, its institutions absorbed, its borders redrawn, until one day people realized the emperor had no clothes and no one bothered to pretend otherwise. The boy who might have been a footnote in livelier times became, by accident of history, the period at the end of a millennium-long sentence. His tomb, wherever it is, isn't just a burial site, it's the unmarked grave of an idea. From Alexander the Great's vanishing act in Alexandria to the scattered remains of Suleiman the Magnificent, these 30 rulers left behind more than just empires. They left riddles carved in stone, hidden beneath rivers, or lost to the sands of time. Each missing tomb isn't just an empty space on a map, it's a doorway to questions we're still desperate to answer. What treasures might lie with Genghis Khan beneath the Mongolian steppes? Could Nefertiti's burial chamber really lurk behind Tutankhamun's golden walls? And what would Ramses VIII's untouched grave reveal about an empire on the brink of collapse? The allure of these mysteries isn't just about gold or glory, it's about connection. Every undiscovered tomb is a conversation across centuries, a chance to hear history's whispers without the filter of textbooks or legends. Think of Montezuma, his resting place swallowed by modern Mexico City, or Boudicca, whose defiant spirit might still linger beneath an unmarked English field. These aren't just archaeological cold cases, they're invitations to wonder. What if Attila's riverbed tomb held the sword that terrified Rome? Or if Cyrus the Great's empty sarcophagus was never meant to hold his bones at all? What keeps these searches alive, even when the trail goes cold, is the thrill of possibility. Technology evolves ground-penetrating radar, DNA analysis, even AI, and with it, our ability to peel back layers of the past. But more than that, these missing tombs remind us that history isn't a static record. It's a living, breathing puzzle where one discovery could rewrite everything we thought we knew. So, what's your theory? Could Cleopatra's tomb still lie submerged off the coast of Alexandria, waiting for a storm to reveal its location? Might Harold II's bones rest beneath Waltham Abbey stones, or does Eric the Holy's reliquary hold more than just myth? The beauty of these enigmas is that they belong to all of us, every amateur sleuth, every armchair historian, everyone who's ever looked at an ancient ruin and thought, there's more to this story. The tombs may be lost, but the hunt is far from over, and who knows, the next great discovery might come from a farmer's plow striking stone, a satellite image revealing a hidden pattern, or even a viewer like you connecting dots others missed. Until then, these rulers remain where they've always been, just beyond our reach, but never beyond our imagination. The past isn't finished speaking. Are you listening?